With the New Orleans Saints still not set at right tackle, someone needs to claim the job as theirs. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as the Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net and Saints analyst with WWL TV. On today's episode of Locked On Saints, we're going to take a look at the kicker and punter battles, which are absolutely heating up. We haven't given a lot of airtime to the specialists. Let's break those down here today. We're also going to take a look at Chase Young, who you probably haven't heard too much about over the course of the last couple of weeks, and it's because he's never stopped tearing it up, and now all of a sudden that's just the expectation. We'll highlight what Chase Young has achieved so far this camp. We're going to start everything off with a look at right tackle, and no, not just Trevor Penning, but right tackle as a whole, because I think there might be a bigger issue than just Trevor Penning at the position. We appreciate you very much, as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day, and for being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel, who are making every moment more all summer long, because all summer they're giving all customers a free boost or bonus every day. That means there's something for everyone every day, all summer long at FanDuel.com. Go and check them out today. All right. So look, there's been a lot of conversation, including on this show, around Trevor Penning and the New Orleans Saints right tackle position. Here's what we know. Trevor Penning, so far, has not fully fallen into place as the guy that can be your reliable starter on the offensive line. We all saw the preseason game, 25 snaps or 20 plus snaps that he played. We've seen it in training camp. Those of us that have been present for training camp, we saw it again on Wednesday, where he struggled a bit on a few plays. I watched Cam Jordan just give him a swim move to his outside shoulder and then free release right off that. Like, we're seeing all of it, right? Particularly in pass protection. He's actually a lot of fun to watch as a run protector. I mean, he's awesome in that area, but we've just never really seen him taking those steps forward when it comes to the pass protection. And it's easy to just sit here and rail on Trevor Penning, right? Trevor Penning this, Trevor Penning that, Trevor Penning this, Trevor Penning that. But really, why hasn't some other player, if Trevor Penning is so bad, why hasn't some other player left him as the clear, better option to start at right tackle? Because I can't say that we have seen that. We've seen good things from Landon Young all along the offensive line, but have we seen enough from him to say that he should be the starting right tackle? I'm not sure. Udoh, same thing. We've seen him play on the interior, which is not where he's at his strongest. We've also seen him, though, play right tackle when it comes to second, third team reps, things like that. And then the only other guy that's really gotten into that conversation over at right tackle is rookie tackle Josiah Aziram, which there's just no world in which he's going to start right away. The kid's only been playing the position for 2 years. He's only been playing offensive line for 2 years. So he is a fantastic option as a development piece because he's got the attitude, he's got the work ethic, he's got the build, he's got everything, just doesn't have the experience. So Josiah Aziram earns a get out of jail free card when it comes to this conversation. But the other guys, what's going on? If Trevor Penning is struggling so much, if Trevor Penning is having such a bad camp, which, listen, he is struggling. He has had bad moments in camp. There's no doubt about that. I'm not trying to make any excuse for him. But where are the other guys that should be leaping him in the conversation? We just simply haven't seen that. Dennis Allen spoke about as much Wednesday after training camp practice in his media availability, where he talked about, look, no one has jumped out and said, I deserve this job, plant the flag. No one's doing that. So someone has to. It could still be Trevor Penning. I just think that Trevor Penning's kind of time is running out in terms of proving that he should be the week 1 starter, right? At right tackle. He could be the week 7 starter at right tackle. But as of right now, his focus should be on proving that he is the week 1 starter at right tackle. And right now we haven't seen that. But now up against the San Francisco 49ers and throughout these practices this week, this is the time for everything to click for Trevor Penning if there were a more advantageous time. There's no better time than now for it to happen. Because if it doesn't happen for Trevor Penning, what if it happens for one of these other guys? What if it happens for Landon Young? What if it happens for Udoh? What if it happens for, somebody else that ends up getting an opportunity to play at right tackle? Then all of a sudden, Trevor Penning ends up leapt, but he hasn't been leapt as of this point. So as much as we've seen Trevor Penning not perform up to expectation, which is unfortunately for him, round one expectation, because he was a first round pick and the Saints gave up a lot of capital to get that first round pick to get him and Chris Olave in the same draft. This is the time. You got to be able to show up. And so this is going to be a big thing that I'm going to be watching over the course of the last couple of days of training camp proper here in Irvine before that San Francisco 49ers game. And then, of course, we'll be watching very closely come the San Francisco 49ers game on Sunday. This is a big week for Trevor Penning. And it could be an even bigger week for somebody else that ends up kind of jumping in here. I don't think that the Saints are super into the idea of looking for more options. They moved on from Kyler Baugh, undrafted free agent rookie on the defensive line, to add another tight end, which is a position group that didn't necessarily need anybody, right? They added Mason Fairchild on Wednesday, brought him back after moving on from him earlier this offseason, earlier in training camp. But you could have used that roster spot to bring in another offensive lineman where you clearly still need help, where you clearly still need to drive competition. So clearly the Saints don't look at it that way. They're not looking at it as they need to drive more competition, that they need to bring in more players, which might be the wrong choice, might be the right choice. I don't know. We'll find out. We'll certainly see. But the Saints have been using their roster moves to do things like address wide receiver and try to keep a healthy amount of wide receivers on their roster, try to keep a healthy stock of cornerbacks and defensive backs on their roster. So in an opportunity where there are wide open opportunities to bring in guys to help on your offensive line, they have eschewed that option, which tells you that they believe that somebody on this roster right now can, will, or at least needs to step up. Who will it be? Who will it be at right tackle? Trevor Penning's got the inside track, but you have to imagine that if he keeps struggling and if things don't work out, that they're eventually going to be looking for somebody else to step up and say, this is my job now. Somebody's got to do it, whether it's Penning, whether it's Landon Young, whether it's Udoh, whether it's whomever. Somebody has got to claim that role and not win it because the other guys lost it, win it because it's their role. Who's it going to be? We'll see. Coming up next, I want to take a look at Chase Young, who has had a fantastic training camp so far. You haven't heard a lot about him here recently. Why? Because his outstanding performance has created nothing but positive expectation. We've got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The show is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp Therapy Online has been awesome for me. I treat therapy as a non-negotiable, something that I don't ever want to miss or give up or anything like that. Everybody's got their own non-negotiables, especially those of us that are looking at, all right, how do I make the most constructive use of my free time and things like that? That's where non-negotiables come in big time. And maybe you don't know your non-negotiables yet. Well, that's why I would recommend, if you've been thinking about it at least, trying out therapy, because it can turn into a non-negotiable for you. The reason why I love BetterHelp is because it allows me to be able to stick to BetterHelp as something that I never, or therapy as something that I never want to miss, something I don't want to give up, because they make it easy because of the fact that it's entirely online. It's built to be flexible and completely suited to your schedule. You can do video chats, text chats, phone calls, everything. You don't have to do waiting rooms, traffic, any of that stuff. It makes it super accessible for you to get the help that you're looking for. So you've been thinking about trying therapy, give BetterHelp a try today. Go ahead and check them out. BetterHelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, family. If you haven't heard much about Chase Young lately, it's not because he hasn't been doing anything. It's because he's never stopped doing all the good things. We appreciate you very much for being here for another episode of Locked On Saints. Don't forget for your second listen today to go and check out Vinny Iyer and Michelle Majuk over at Locked On Fantasy Football. I listened to their episode the other day about rookie quarterbacks and how that ends up impacting a lot of stuff across the NFL. Guys that you should invest in, guys that you shouldn't invest in, sleepers, lots of great stuff over on the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast. Every Monday through Friday, brand new episodes, daily fantasy football advice. Go and check it out over at Locked On Fantasy Football, wherever you get your podcast, and on YouTube, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you haven't heard much about Chase Young over the course of the last week, I promise you it's not because he's underwhelmed or fallen off or hasn't had as much of an impact or anything like that. On the contrary, it's that he has continuously had the same impact that now we just kind of expect it, right? When Chase Young made his first debut in team drills for the New Orleans Saints, he played 3 snaps. 3 snaps. He got pressure on 2 of those snaps, walking Landon Young back, blowing up Jesse Davis. This has been since what, day 5? Day 5 or day 6 of training camp? Every single day. And I've not had this experience before, mind you. Every single day, I have written down sacked by 99, whether it's Derek Carr, Jay Kaner, or Spencer Rattler, whoever it is that has the massive and disproportionate displeasure of having to deal with Chase Young on the other side of the football. They've all met him up close and personal during team drills. If Chase Young plays 80% as well as how he has practiced here throughout training camp and stays healthy for the 2024 season, always a caveat that we should include with any and all players, but certainly those with an injury history, which unfortunately Chase Young does have an injury history. It's why he has an incentive-heavy contract based on the number of games that he plays in 2024. It's just the reality. If he plays 80% as well in the 2024 season as he has played here throughout training camp, he's going to be a double-digit sack player in 2024. Now, listen, I'm not just trying to get you hyped. I'm not just trying to get you excited about Chase Young. Here's a couple of things to keep in mind when it comes to that statement. This isn't all about Chase Young, right? Carl Granderson has been excellent on the opposite side of him. There are going to be snaps where Carl Granderson makes Chase Young's job easier. The New Orleans Saints have been one of the best pass defense teams in the league since 2017. Maybe not one of the best pass rush teams over the course of the past year or two, but certainly one of the best pass defense teams in terms of guarding the pass with the secondary, and have, in my opinion, one of the best secondaries in the NFL that has the chance to get even better if they add Justin Simmons, and one of the deepest cornerback rooms in the NFL. That too is going to help Chase Young. It's going to make his job a little bit easier because he doesn't necessarily have to get to the quarterback in 2.5, 3 seconds. He might be able to get to the quarterback in 4, 5 seconds because of how good the coverage can hold up sometimes. And we've certainly seen that here in training camp a couple of times where quarterbacks have not had a place to go with the football, and that has turned into either a would-be sack because of training camp or a scramble by the quarterback that is typically, blown dead pretty quickly because they don't want the quarterbacks actually running and hurting themselves in training camps in the NFL, which makes perfect sense. So for Chase Young, performing at about 80% of what he's doing here in camp isn't just about what he's creating on his own. He's going to be aided by all of those little other pieces or big other pieces that are around him that might help make his job a little bit easier. And then we broke down in yesterday's episode, in case you missed it, the effectiveness of having a guy like Cam Jordan also take some snaps on the interior with Chase Young and Carl Granderson also on the field. Same thing for Peyton Turner, another guy that can mix into that as well. And so that's another place where either a Brian Brzee or a Nathan Shepard or a Colin Saunders or a Christian Boyd, which is my projection for what the Saints defensive tackle depth chart will be. If one of those guys takes up what's called an ace block, which is when the center and guard double team the same player, that gives Chase Young a one-on-one on the other side. If you take Cam Jordan and you move him to the inside and Cam Jordan gets that ace block, Chase Young has a one-on-one on the other side. Let me go even deeper than that. You line up Chase Young and Cam Jordan right next to one another, right? Cam Jordan in the inside, Chase Young on the outside. At the snap, the goal would probably be to try to double Chase Young in some circumstances. That would be what we call a duo block, which would be a guard and tackle double teaming, or I think sometimes they call it a trio block, which would be the tackle and the tight end. There's another one called the quad block where it's actually 2 tight ends double teaming. We actually will probably see the Saints deploy that every now and then with the number of 2 tight end sets they're expected to deploy in 2024. So just a little bit of nerdiness for you there. But let's get back to the point. Cam Jordan on the inside, Chase Young on the outside, right? The goal might be for that duo block, the guard and tackle, to take Chase Young while the center tries to get to Cam Jordan on the inside. That's assuming that this is a man blocking scheme or a passing snap, right? We're assuming a passing snap in this situation. What if they twist? What if they stunt? What if Cam Jordan runs underneath Chase Young and then attacks the outside while Chase Young comes over the top and then barrels in through the interior? Then all of a sudden, that impacts your blocking scheme. It's a pretty massive impact. And that opens up more opportunities for a guy like Chase Young to, again, just play at 80% of what he's doing here at training camp, and he's looking really, really good. Here's the other thing that I'll say about Chase Young as well. I have not seen a lick of concern around effort when it comes to Chase Young. I watched Chase Young run and pursue Spencer Rattler 7-8 yards behind the line of scrimmage, and then turn back downfield and push and chase Alvin Kamara 15 yards past the line of scrimmage to get up behind him to make a tackle on a little dump off in the middle of the field. I have seen Chase Young, the defense kind of has this rule to where anytime that the ball is on the ground, their job is to go get the football. And this kind of trains you like how to pick up a football off of the ground, which sounds easy, but isn't always the easiest when you're trying to run full speed and you've got like this happy mind that's like, there's no one in front of me. It's all green grass. There's a potential for a touchdown here. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. So there is definitely that. But he has been one of those players that has consistently also chased the football. No pun intended with his name, Chase. But if you haven't heard about Chase Young here recently, I just wanted to come back and revisit his performance because I think he has had an impressive training camp and has truly been one of the most impressive pieces in New Orleans Saints training camp before, or so far. And so if you haven't heard about him here recently, it's not because he's underwhelming all of a sudden or because he's not doing the things. It's just that like we're kind of used to seeing it now. But every single day I have sack by 99 written somewhere in my notes. I can guarantee it. Absolutely guarantee it. He has been awesome. Coming up next, let's take a look at the punter and kicker battles. I know it's not the biggest topic in the world, but it's important because remember, kicker might have won you a game last year and put you in the playoffs. So definitely something to check out. So we got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by friends at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook and the official sports betting partners here on the Locked On Podcast Network. The New Orleans Saints still favored to win their game against the Carolina Panthers to open up the season. I don't think that that's going to change at any time before toe meets leather to kick off week 1 of the season. But maybe you like the Saints in that matchup. Maybe you like them against the spread. Maybe you like them to win, but not by more than 4.5. Maybe you like Carolina in the upset. Whichever one you choose, there is something for you over at FanDuel. And they're making it even more fun here all throughout the summer because all summer they're giving all customers a free boost or bonus every day. Every day. That means that there's something for someone, everyone, every day, all summer long at FanDuel.com. It doesn't get any better than that. So go and check them out today because that's where you're going to be able to go to make the most out of your summer. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel, official sports betting partners of Major League Baseball. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. The New Orleans Saints specialists are feeling, and I quote Lou Hedley, New Orleans Saints incumbent punter, the heat in the kitchen. Let's break it all down here as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. We appreciate you very much for being here. Don't forget, we are your team every day. We'll be live right after practice again tomorrow. A little bit tighter to practice tomorrow than we were on Wednesday. Don't worry about that. Just, meeting days on Wednesdays and stuff like that. So we'll be there with you right after we get all wrapped up at practice. So one of the big things that we've been watching so far here throughout training camp is, of course, the kicker and punter kind of battles. And, John Hendricks and I from a few weeks before like training camp at OTAs and all these other things talked about like, hey, there might actually be a battle here. Like this might be more than just, them getting a look at some of these other guys and figuring out, how they're going to go about all this or whatever. I think we've now heard enough of Dennis Allen kind of referring to the competition as a competition when it comes to kicker and punter. Blake Grupe has struggled beyond 50 yards. He missed a total of 4 field goals on Wednesday. not ideal, right? Missed one from 42, missed one from 57, and then 2 more from 58 in end of game-winning drives, or excuse me, end of half drives. So where a kickoff or a field goal rather would have given the team a 3-0 lead in this simulation that they were running. We've also seen him miss, quite a few field goals all throughout. And so as I look at sort of my tracking numbers and things like that, I'm looking at, I think I have right now, Blake Grupe 54 of 65. So 11 field goals missed. If my numbers are accurate, there's some that like we don't fully catch on to and things like that. Meanwhile, we've seen I've got Charlie Smyth right now at 47 of 56. So I've seen him miss fewer field goals in those situations. And so we'll see exactly where it all goes. I think what you're looking at when it comes to both these guys is that like Blake Grupe has been with the team for a year. There's a little bit of familiarity. Why does that matter? The mechanism, right? The operation, snap, hold, kick, having the same long snapper in Zach Wood, who, is probably like the lock of all locks on a New Orleans Saints roster, to Lou Hedley, the holder, with the kick from Blake Grupe. Doing that for a second year together does have value. Does it have as much value as a bigger leg that you would get with Charlie Smyth? And Charlie Smyth, who showed you that he could handle the clutchiest of clutch moments. I mean, I'm giving Charlie Smyth a lot of credit here because I think he deserves it, because we're not just talking about a guy that kicked a 37-yard field goal for a game winner. And some people might hear that and go, oh, it's 37 yards. Whoop-de-doo. But it was legitimately his first ever kick in an American football game. No college, no NFL experience. This dude came straight from Ireland, rugby, and all that, to kicking, but never kicking in a game, in an American football game, to coming to Irvine, I guess, going to Glendale, Arizona, and kicking a 37-yard field goal for a game winner. First of all, incredible story. Awesome story. Secondly, though, what does that say about his nerves and his ability to control that? And by the way, in a away stadium, not at home in front of a supportive crowd that's staying really quiet, fingers crossed, cheering for him when he kicks the field goal and everything like that. No, he was in opposing territory. I understand that it was a preseason game as well. I get that. But under all circumstances, that was a high pressure situation for a Charlie Smyth. Can he do that? Is that who Charlie Smyth is? I think there's value in considering that. And then so is the the cohesiveness or cohesion of the operation, Zach Wood, Lou Hedley, Blake Grupe, more valuable than the potential upside that you could have with a Charlie Smyth? And is there real upside with Charlie Smyth, or was that just one kick? There's a lot to weigh here. A whole lot to weigh in terms of how you go about this. And I can sit here, I can ask questions all day long. You know what I mean? I can sit here and do that all day long. But, my opinion I haven't settled yet. I don't know where to go on this. I love the competition. And so I think really you're looking at these next 2 preseason games to make these decisions. And then, of course, as we've discussed here on the show before, the good news with Charlie Smyth is that he's an international player pathway player, right? International pathway program player, excuse me. And so what that means is that he's a roster exemption. So you could technically keep him as what would effectively be a 17th practice squad member, basically, all season. And Blake Grupe can keep his job as a starting kicker. And if ever you wanted to pivot, you could, and it doesn't cost you a roster spot. So there's definitely some value in that. And then if Blake Grupe has a great year here in 2024 and then, needs to be paid, but the Saints don't feel like paying, then they've had a year to develop Charlie Smyth in the background and could potentially turn to him at a later time. Like there's a lot of stuff and a lot of ways that you could potentially handle this. So I want to give credit where credit's due that man, there's good stuff from both of these guys, regardless of how many kicks each have missed and everything like that. There's really good stuff from both these guys, really good value to both of these guys as well. So we'll see which way it goes. But I think the ideal situation is probably either Charlie Smyth wins the role outright or Blake Grupe wins the role outright, and then you get to hang on to Charlie Smyth anyway. It's a good win-win for the New Orleans Saints, no matter what, they end up on the right side of this. Punter, on the other hand, is a really interesting one because Matthew Hayball, the undrafted free agent rookie punter that has come in to challenge Lou Hedley, has an incredible leg. Like, insane leg. Really, really good. 50 plus yard kicks, 5+ second hang times, all these other things. The punts are pretty. Okay. They're aesthetically pleasing. Almost said aesthetically pleasing. They're aesthetically pleasing. But does that 50-yard kick give you or lose you the opportunity to be able to cover it as a punt coverage unit? Sure, 5 seconds, but the further that ball goes, the less the hang time allows those players to be able to get into position and all those other things. So I do want to note that. Lou Hedley, on the other hand, has a consistency that the Saints clearly like. I think both these guys have had some what you would call shanks to where they go, flying off to one side or the other. But I think that the Saints kind of have the sort of comfort level and familiarity with Lou Hedley that could work in his position. Dennis Allen saying that if you look at his kind of dot chart in terms of where his punts have landed, they're all very concentrated. Like, he's really good with direction. And Matthew Hayball maybe is a little bit better with length. So you just got to kind of figure out like which of those is most important to you. So that ends up being something that I think the Saints kind of have to go. If I had to pick a guy from each of these positions, I'd probably stick with the incumbents right now. But that's a really, really tough decision. It's a really, really tough decision because both of these guys that have come in the challenge have definitely made this competition interesting. And I have a feeling there's a good chance I answer that question very differently in a week. So we'll definitely come back to this conversation. But just something we haven't highlighted much here throughout camp. Had the extra time, wanted to make sure that we discussed it here today. All right, y'all, we'll be live later on today after practice. Fresh episode for you in the morning as well. As always, we appreciate you very much for making Locked On Saints a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure that you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing, how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation, I'll holla at you.